Hey guys, welcome to our college football 2023 bowl predictions video. This is part 3. We'll be looking at the games from December 27th through the 29th. We've been breaking this up into 4 parts. We've done 1, 2, this is part 3. Part 4 will be coming out later this week. Like I said, we are going to look at who's going to win, who's going to lose, and what we predict the final scores will be. So hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get things started because we have about 12 games or so to run through. So the very first game that we have coming up is Wednesday, December 27th at 2 p.m. on ESPN. We have 6-6 Virginia Tech versus 11-2 Tulane. This is the Military Bowl presented by GoBowling.com. Virginia Tech is coming into this game as 10.5-point favorites here. That's a massive spread. So this game was previously like a 2-point spread, but Tulane's had a lot of changes. So Michael Pratt, who is their star quarterback, he's not going to be playing this game. He did declare for the draft. They still have Hughes, but obviously Willie Fritz did leave as the head coach. He's now the head coach of Houston, and he took a lot of the coaching staff with him. So they have a lot of missing parts. This is going to be a completely turned over team for Virginia Tech. This is actually not a bad team, so they can actually rush the ball pretty well. They're going to be looking to keep the ball on the ground, trying to run it on Tulane, try to control the clock. Brent Pry, who is the head coach for Virginia Tech, he has been doing pretty decent his second year on the job. So looking at some of the team stats here, Virginia Tech comes in. They average 28.6 points per game. Tulane averages 26.8. And on defense, Virginia Tech gives up 24.3 points per game. Tulane gives up 18.9 points per game. So Tulane is the better team if they had a whole team, if they had their head coach. Like we said, there's going to be a lot of missing pieces. So I have Virginia Tech controlling the pace of the game through the run game. I have them winning 31-20 and also covering that spread as well. The next game that we're looking at is at 5:30 p.m. on ESPN. We have 8-4 North Carolina Tar Heels versus 8-4 West Virginia Mountaineers. This is the Duke's Mayo Bowl. West Virginia 6.5-point favorites here. So actually props to West Virginia. So they finished with an 8-4 season. A lot of teams did not have the Mountaineers getting a bowl game this year. So they did really good in the Big 12 this year. For the Tar Heels, their best player, Drake May, is not going to be playing this game. So he is going to the NFL draft. He is a top 5 pick. That's a massive loss. They've had a lot of good quarterback play. They had Sam Howell. They had Drake May. As of right now, they're going to have the backup playing. We don't know anything about this guy. So it's kind of hard to pick a game when the most important position, the guy's not playing, and the guy who is playing, no one has ever seen him play before, because you're kind of going into that game blind. But that's what college football season is now. You have guys declaring early for the draft. You have guys going into the transfer portal. You have guys going in the portal, coming back out of the portal. So it's kind of a complete cluster as of right now. But that's 2023 college football. So the one thing that the Tar Heels do have, though, is they have Hampton at running back. He's one of the best running backs in the country. He's closing in on 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns. So even though they don't have Drake May, they also are going to be looking to run the ball. Philip Lindsay, who is the offensive coordinator, is a run-first coordinator. So he's going to try to control the game through the run game, take the pressure off of the quarterback playing because he doesn't have any starts to his name, and try to help them out there. Des Walker should also be playing for West Virginia. West Virginia is also a run-heavy team, and they run the ball really well. They have 3 guys over 700 rushing yards. So they're going to be looking to distribute the ball through the rushing game. Looking at some of the team stats here. UNC averages 36.6 points per game, but obviously that's with Drake May, so take that with a grain of salt. West Virginia averages 31.6 points per game, and on defense, these teams are virtually tied. UNC gives up 27.1 points per game. West Virginia gives up 27.5 points per game. I have West Virginia getting the win here. 30-27, so not covering the spread, but still getting their 9th win. That would be a massive step forward for the Mountaineers to get 9 wins this year. Can the Tar Heels win this game? Yes, they're not a bad team. I can't pick them because I don't know anything about the backup quarterback. But they can win based off of their run game. But if I was forced to pick, I'm going with the Mountaineers. The next game that we're looking at 8 p.m. on Fox, we have number 15 Louisville sitting at 10-3 versus USC 7-5. This is the DirecTV Holiday Bowl. Louisville 7-point favorites here. So that's a massive spread there against USC. So USC, obviously a very talented team. They have Lincoln Riley as the head coach. The guy is an offensive guru. and they're coming into this game as a pretty big underdog. So that's kind of pathetic there. For Louisville, they're coming off of that pathetic game versus Florida State where they did not score a touchdown the whole game. Very, very pathetic showing. But they still have a lot of playmakers. Louisville is not a bad team. They are built through the portal. They actually had a pretty decent year. They had a pretty decent offense, and they had a pretty decent defense. For USC, they had an extremely good offense and a completely pathetic defense. One of the worst defenses I have ever seen. They also, Caleb Williams is not going to be playing this game. That's a massive loss. So they're going to be rolling with their backup quarterback, who is Miller Moss. USC also had a lot of players go into the transfer portal. So this team's been completely depleted. They have some guys declare for the draft, just like Caleb Williams. They had some guys go in the portal. So who we see come out to play this game is not going to be who we've seen starting so far at this point of the season. Looking at some of the team stats here, Louisville, they average 30.9 points per game. USC, 41.8 points per game, but obviously that was also with Caleb Williams. And on defense, Louisville gives up 19.7 points per game, and USC gives up a god-awful 34.9 points per game with their starting roster. And they have some of these guys are in the portal, so they'll have their backups playing. So the defense, even though they fired Alex Grinch, it's a season too late. I have Louisville getting the win 35-30 and not covering the spread. USC can definitely win this game. There's no doubt about it. Louisville sometimes has some offensive problems. USC is very skilled with one of the best play callers. But just like North Carolina, we don't know anything about Miller Moss. So I can't pick them to win when USC has so many defensive deficiencies. And now they'll also have their backup quarterback. The next game that we'll be looking at is at 9 p.m. on ESPN. We have the 7-5 Texas A&M Aggies versus number 20 Oklahoma State sitting at 9-4. This is the Tax Act Texas Bowl. So it's the Aggies versus the Cowboys. The Aggies are 2-point favorites here. So the Aggies are 2-point favorites versus a ranked Oklahoma State team. So that just kind of lets you know how things pan out here. Oklahoma State is obviously coming off of that beatdown from Texas in the Big 12 Championship, the last time that they'll be playing Texas as of right now. The Aggies, obviously Jimbo Fisher's fired. They've had a complete change on the coaching staff. Mike Elko will now be the head coach. Now, he's not coaching this game, but he will pick up next season. But all of the players on the roster right now, they want to make a show of this game because they want to show Mike Elko what they can do going into next season. For the Aggies, they had a lot of guys also go into the transfer portal. A lot of high fours and 5-star players left the team, went to the portal. So they'll be pretty depleted also. They've also had a lot of injuries at the quarterback position. When you're looking at the team stats here, the Aggies average 34.2 points per game. Oklahoma State 29.5 points per game. And on defense, the Aggies actually have a pretty decent defense. They give up 21.3 points per game, and Oklahoma State gives up 29.0 points per game. Oklahoma State, they have Ollie Gordon, one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the country. He's closing in on 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns. This guy can run. They're going to be trying to keep the ball in his hands the whole game, but their biggest problem is they cannot throw the ball with Bowman. He's closing in on 3,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, 12 picks. He throws a lot of interceptions. That's going to be the main thing that holds them back because obviously the Aggies have a pretty decent defense. I have A&M winning this game 28-24 and covering the spread based mainly on their defense. Now we're moving on to our Thursday, December 28th games, and at 2:15 on ESPN, we have 6-6 Rutgers versus 7-5 Miami. Rutgers is a 1-point favorite here, so this game is virtually a pick'em. With Rutgers, they don't have a very good offense at all, but they do actually have a top 20 defense. They get after the quarterback. They get a lot of pressure. This is a Greg Schiano team, so they're really physical. They're going to get a lot of sacks, pressures, trying to stop the run game. For Miami, they've had a lot of guys go in the portal. They also had a lot of changes at quarterback. So Tyler Van Dyke did transfer to Wisconsin. So their starting quarterback gone. Backup quarterback Riley Williams did break his arm, so he's not going to be playing. So they're actually going with their third-string quarterback, Ja'Cory Brown, who hasn't played in a game since the middle of last season. So that's kind of hard to pick this game also because first, second-string quarterback out. We're now going with the third-string guy who hasn't played a snap this season. So we're kind of going into this game blind because we don't know what he's really going to look like. But looking at the team stats here, Rutgers averages 22.6 points per game, so they leave a lot to be desired on offense. Miami 32.1 points per game. And on defense, they both have pretty decent defenses. So Rutgers averages 21.0 points per game, Miami 22.1 points per game. But all of Miami's safeties did declare for the draft. They're all first and second round picks. So they're going to be pretty thin secondary. They're going to be definitely thin at quarterback. And they've also had a couple guys go in the portal. Rutgers is basically running the same team back. So they still have that same defense coming back. That's why Rutgers is the favorite here, because they have their starters coming back. Miami is pretty depleted. And Rutgers does have their quarterback closing in on 1,100 yards. But Mario Cristobal should have this team ready. They have to get to 8 wins. Their goal is to try to get to 8 wins to go into next season, having a strong note. I'm going to go with Miami winning this game based off of their defense. Winning 23-17, so I'm going with that +1. I have a very low confidence level here because Miami loses these types of games, and they have a lot of pieces missing. But I'm going to go with them. This is a very physical team, and they can run the ball downhill. The next game that we're looking at 9:15 p.m. on ESPN, we have number 14 Arizona Wildcats sitting at 9-3 versus number 12 Oklahoma Sooners sitting at 10-2. This is the Valero Alamo Bowl, and Arizona is 2.5-point favorites here. A very close spread, but this is another one of those games that's had a lot of changes. So obviously, Dillon Gabriel, who was the star quarterback for the Sooners, he went into the transfer portal out of nowhere, transferred to the Oregon Ducks. So now the Sooners coach on the field is gone. They also lost their offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby. He's now the head coach of the Mississippi State team. So some changes on the coaching staff and massive changes at the quarterback position. So Oklahoma, they're actually going to be running with the backup quarterback, who is Jackson Arnold. He was a 5-star, so he obviously has a lot of talent, but no one has seen much of him going up against a very tough Arizona team. They have a really good offense. They have a really good defense. Now, the Arizona Wildcats under Jedd Fisch, they came out of nowhere this season. They're probably the surprise team of the year so far. So props to them. And Noah Fifita, he's the backup quarterback for the Wildcats, but he did start probably around week 2 to 3. And he's gone off since then. Never gave the job back to the starter. They have a really strong team. Looking at the team stats here, the Wildcats average 34.3 points per game. Sooners 43.2 points per game. And on defense, the Wildcats give up 20.8 points per game. Sooners give up 22.3 points per game. So both of these teams have good offenses. Both of them have very good defenses. But the Sooners, they don't have Dillon Gabriel. And he's one of the main things that kept them in the games, because Oklahoma does not have a good rushing attack. That was the main thing holding them back. But Dillon Gabriel ran the ball a lot because he is a mobile quarterback. But nonetheless, I'm still going to go with Oklahoma getting the win here, 31-28. So I'm going with that +2.5. Could Arizona win this game? Definitely. This is a very good team, and they have their starting team coming back. Next game we're looking at is at 11 a.m., so an early one on ESPN. We have number 24 SMU sitting at 11-2 versus 6-6 Boston College. This is the Wasabi Fenway Bowl, so this should be at Fenway Park. Obviously, that's where Boston College always plays their bowl games. SMU, massive spread here. They're 10-point favorites here. So SMU, Preston Stone went off this season at quarterback, closing in on 3,200 yards, 28 touchdowns, 6 picks. But he did get hurt the last game of the season. So they're going to be going with their backup, who is Kevin Jennings. But the guy actually played really well filling in for Preston Stone. They did win the American Conference with Kevin Jennings. He was throwing it. He was running it. They have a very good offense. They have a very good defense for Boston College. This is definitely a run-heavy team because Castellanos at quarterback leads the team in passing, obviously, and he leads the team in rushing, closing in on 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground. So he's definitely a massive dual threat, and he's closing in on 2,200 passing yards. Looking at the team stats here, SMU averages 40.6 points per game, Boston College 25.0 points per game, and on defense, SMU gives up 17.4 points per game. That's top 15 in the country. Boston College gives up 29.5 points per game. So SMU, they're obviously the way better team. They have a lot of 4-star transfer players. This is a very tough roster. I have the Mustangs winning this game 35-24 and covering the spread. Next game we're looking at 5:45 on ESPN. Number 18 NC State at 9-3 versus number 25 Kansas State sitting at 8-4. This is the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Kansas State 2.5-point favorites here. So as we're getting further into this bowl season, you see the matchups are getting better and better. We're getting more and more ranked teams because we're getting closer and closer to round one of the playoffs coming up. So in this Pop-Tarts Bowl, Kansas State is the favorite just barely, but Kansas State has had a lot of massive changes. So obviously, Will Howard, who is their star quarterback, he's closing on 2,700 yards, 24 touchdowns, 10 picks, and he also runs the ball a lot. He did go into the transfer portal. Supposedly, he's going to USC, so he'll be the USC starter next season. So their coach on the field is gone. They still have Giddens at running back. He's a beast, closing in on 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. And I'm pretty sure the offensive coordinator, Klein, I'm pretty sure that he's now the offensive coordinator for the Aggies starting next year. So changes at the quarterback position, changes on the coaching staff. So just like some of these other teams, we're kind of going into this game blind. We don't know what to expect from Kansas State. They have a lot of pieces missing. NC State, they are a run-heavy team. They're going to try to keep the ball on the ground and play sound defense to try to win this game. They always win their games in very low-scoring, close games. Looking at team stats here, NC State averages 26.8 points per game. Kansas State, 37.8 points per game. And on defense, NC State gives up 20.2 points per game. Kansas State gives up 21.2 points per game. So both have really good defenses. Kansas State has a really good offense. Will Howard is gone. But I still think with Giddens, Kansas State, very good head coach, they're going to win this game 28-24. And I have them covering that spread. If they had Howard, I'm thinking it's like a 35-24. But I have them winning 28-24. We're now moving on to our Friday, December 29th games, kicking things off at 12 p.m. on ESPN. We have number 22, Clemson, sitting at 8-4 versus 7-5, Kentucky. This is the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. Clemson, 4.5-point favorites here. Obviously, with Kentucky, they always have offensive issues, but they also always have a really tough defense led by Mark Stoops here. The thing is Mark Stoops would love to win this game. This would be a massive win if he can beat Clemson. For Clemson, they kind of had a down year this season, started out very highly ranked, lost some games, lost to Notre Dame, lost to Louisville, lost to Florida State, fell out of the polls, they lost to Miami. They're trying to get things back on track here. They need to get to 9-4, or they're basically going to be forgotten about with modern college football. You have to be winning constantly, winning big games. You definitely have to win your bowl games versus Kentucky. So looking at the team stats here, obviously, Clemson comes in. They have Cade Klubnik at quarterback. He was a 5-star. Never fully panned out to his full potential, but he's a decent quarterback. And Kentucky has Devin Leary, who actually played pretty good the last 3 to 4 weeks of the season. Had a really crappy first 7 to 8 weeks, but really picked things up there that last month. Clemson averages 29.2 points per game. So the offense was the thing that held them back this season, but they did play better the last 2 weeks. Kentucky, they averaged 28.6 points per game. And on defense, Clemson, very solid defense, a top 10 defense, and the number 1 total defense in all of college football. They give up 19.9 points per game. Kentucky gives up 24.8 points per game. So I have Clemson getting the win here. They're just the way better team. They're the way better coach team. I have them winning 28-17 and covering that spread. Next game that we're looking at 2 p.m. on CBS, we have number 19 Oregon State at 8-4. Versus number 16 Notre Dame at 9-3. So a ranked on ranked matchup. This is the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. Notre Dame 6.5-point favorites here. So Oregon State, they're obviously another one of those teams that's been completely overhauled. Smith, who is the head coach, he did leave. He did take the Michigan State job. DJU, who was their star quarterback, he's now in the transfer portal, so he's not playing. The backup quarterback, the 5-star, he followed Smith to Michigan State, so he's gone. So a complete overhaul of the team. Now, Oregon State's main claim to fame was they could run the ball with Martinez. The guy was a beast, closing in on 1,200 yards. They had DJU who could pass it, who could throw it, and they played really good defense. But as we just discussed, they had a lot of pieces that have since changed. Had they all been there, this would have been a really close, competitive game. Notre Dame, obviously they have Sam Hartman, who transferred from Wake Forest to Notre Dame as the starting quarterback. He had a pretty decent season, but he's now gone. He said he's going into the NFL draft. So Notre Dame, they're going to have their backup quarterback playing here. A guy that we haven't seen play the whole season. So there's questions there because We just haven't seen any of these players play, so we don't know what to expect. But they do have a top 10 defense. They get after the starting quarterback, so they're going to be looking to keep this game close. And they have Estime at running back, one of the best running backs in the country, closing in on 1,400 yards and 18 touchdowns. So with Sam Hartman not there, they don't care. They'll just line up in the eye, and they'll just continue to run the ball. Looking at team stats here, Oregon State averages 33.8 points per game. Notre Dame, 39.1 points per game. And on defense, Oregon State gives up 21.5 points per game. Notre Dame gives up 16.6 points per game. I have the Irish winning this game 27-17 and covering the spread. Like I said, they're just going to run the ball with Estime and control the pace of the game and the game clock. The next game that we're looking at is actually a pretty sneaky good game at 3:30 p.m. on ESPN. We have 9-3 Memphis versus 7-5 Iowa State. This is the AutoZone Liberty Bowl. Iowa State 10-point favorites here. So that's a pretty big spread over a pretty decent Memphis team. But Memphis always actually has pretty decent teams, so never sleep on them. Looking at the team stats here, Memphis comes in, they average a whopping 39.7 points per game. Iowa State, they average 26.3 points per game. But obviously with their coach, he always has a really tough defensively led team, and they usually run the ball pretty well. On defense, Memphis gives up a lot of points. They give up 29.0 points per game. Iowa State gives up 21.7 points per game. So Iowa State in the Big 12 this year started out the year pretty bad, but they came on second half, played a lot of teams really close. Like we said, they always have really good linebackers. They always play really tough physical defense. Memphis might not be used to that physical type of play, but they have a pretty decent offense. Looking at their playmakers, they have Hannigan at quarterback closing in on 3,600 yards, 28 touchdowns, 9 picks. Watson at running back closing in on 1,100 yards, 14 touchdowns. And Taylor at wide receiver closing in on 1,000 yards. So they definitely have the better offensive roster, but Iowa State has the better defense. Defense travels in bowl games. I have Iowa State getting the win here. 27-24, a very close game, and they will not cover the spread, but they'll get the win. The next game at 8 p.m. on ESPN. So we're now getting into our New Year's bowl games, the big bowl games. This is the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. We have 10-2 at Missouri, who's number 9 in the country, versus number 7 Ohio State, who is 11-1. So finally, the really big bowl games. Like we said, this is one of the New Year's 6 games. The Buckeyes are 1-point favorites here. This game is virtually a pick-em. This is a top 10 matchup, top 10 on top 10. Missouri, they have the whole team coming back. They had a really good year this season. They have Cook at quarterback, closing in on 3,200 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 picks. Schrader at running back, closing in on 1,500 yards, 13 touchdowns. They also have a really deep wide receiver core led by Burden III, closing in on 1,200 yards. The Buckeyes. So obviously Ryan Day, they did lose in the Big Ten to Michigan, and they didn't get to play in the Big Ten championship. But do not underestimate the Buckeyes here. The main thing, the quarterback is obviously gone. That's the main loss for the Buckeyes. They did lose Kyle McCord. I don't think that's a big loss at all. The guy wasn't very good at all in any way whatsoever. This team is loaded with weapons. He had a pretty good line, one of the deepest wide receiver cores in the country, and he could not throw for over 3,100 yards. Threw a lot of balls wide, threw a lot of balls in the dirt. He's the main reason they lost the Michigan game. It was all on him. So they're going to be going with Max Brown. That's another quarterback we haven't seen play. So this is a Buckeyes team, very good team, but their quarterback is a big question mark right now. We haven't seen him play. Technically, Kyle McCord beat out Max Brown. So what does that mean? Is Max Brown even worse than him? I don't know what's going to happen in this game. So we're kind of going into this game blind also. A lot of question marks there. Looking at the team stats here, Missouri averages 34.1 points per game. The Buckeyes average 32.8 points per game, which is really low for a Ryan Day-led team. On defense, though, Missouri gives up 22.3 points per game. That's a top 35 defense, so they don't have a bad defense. But the Buckeyes give up 11.0 points per game. That's right, 11.0 points per game. Crazy low. Number 2 defense in the country, right behind Michigan. They get after it. They're going to be all over Cook. They're going to be looking to shut that run game down, force them into third and long situations. So no matter who starts at quarterback for the Buckeyes, they're going to have a pretty easy game plan there because you can always rely on your defense showing up. And you still have one of the deepest wide receiver cores in the country. You have Egbuka and you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who's hands down the best wide receiver in the entire nation right now. I have the Buckeyes getting a close win here. Close only because of the quarterback questions. I have them winning 27-20 and covering the spread. So that's my breakdown of our bowl games, part 3. Part 4 should be coming out later this game, which will also have the first round of the playoffs. Hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any comments, drop it below and I'll make sure to respond. Thanks.